Hello and welcome back to the Redmond Gamer. I'm actually going to go through a quick just rant video because today I recently got a whole bunch of cards back from PSA, and I think that it's you'll like this one. This is maybe a little bit more subjective and different than the opinions you usually hear when somebody is, I got a whole box of cards back and I'm like disappointed and angry. I'm actually really happy with the cards that I got back. But what I wanted to do is kind of touch on what I see as the issues when you're getting grades back from cards that you're not necessarily happy with. So there's three things I think we need to kind of discuss. The first thing, and I think that this is the most important, is that when you pull these cards from packs or from sets, or you pick them up at like a convention or whatever, there is an emotional component that's associated with cards. I mean, these are things that it's a hobby, right? It's an experience, or there's some euphoria that's attached to it. So right out the gate, there's sentimentality that's backing everything that we do when we're like collecting cards, collecting video games, collecting memorabilia, you name it. And so that's why when somebody says like, how much you want for it, sometimes they're like, nothing. It's mine. I'm keeping it. So I think it's important to remember that sentimentality is one of the things that, really drives the hobby. And so when we're submitting something like cards to PSA for grading, one of the things that I feel that we run into is like when we see these scores come back, we get very defensive and very protective about the fact that, oh, that didn't hit the grade I expected it to. Now, the reason why we have that conflict is because there's emotion associated. We have emotion with these cards. I mean, we have to kind of recognize that right out the gate. There's emotion backed by everything that we're submitting in. But the other thing that needs to be kind of taken into consideration is that these are opinions. These are opinions. These are expert opinions. I'm like expert, but they're expert opinions. And PSA has basically looked at this card, evaluated it, and given their expert opinion that this is a grade of a 9, or this one's graded as an 8. This one's graded as a 9 as well. That doesn't necessarily mean it's right, and doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. They have been wrong in the past. They've even admitted it. Yes, they have amazingly admitted it from time to time. And that's good that they're willing to admit that sometimes their grades are incorrect, but it's an inconvenience to you. It is an inconvenience to you. And that's one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about and really highlight in this video, is that because there's so much emotion attached to submitting cards into for grading, that when these things come back and they're not in alignment with our expectations, there's basically what happens is it breaks the trust. Okay. People, it's like if you've ever played a video game and you're really getting into the game, but then suddenly the boss is just like super overpowered and they just destroy you and there's no reason or explanation for it. They just crush you. You rage quit. It's like, I'm never playing this game again. You slam the controller down. You probably have to go buy another controller. And it's like, you're done with it. He's like, you're never playing this game again. It's so unfair because sometimes it really was just an improperly balanced boss, and it totally ruins the gaming experience. And maybe sometimes the devs come back and they fix it and the game's suddenly fine again. But if they don't do that, you're basically stuck with a broken game. This is the same system, same situation. You have PSA, who is for the longest time basically not giving you any transparency or insight as to why the boss is so overpowered. And so you submit in a big stack of like PSA slabs, and they come back with grades that are not aligned with your expectation. You rage quit. You're done. And it crushes the brand loyalty that otherwise would have been had. And honestly, really the biggest problem is that they don't give any sort of transparency around why they gave the grades that they did. And I'm not talking about subgrades, folks. I'm talking about just notes, just common sense, talking through what the problem is, explaining why you gave this card a 9, or this card an 8, or this card a 9. It's like, the thing is, if you don't provide that information, you leave it to me to explain why or justify this grade. And I may disagree with you. But the truth of the matter is you could help me disagree with you less if you just simply provided some transparency. If you just told us what the issue was or what what you spotted as you were evaluating the card because you're an expert, then we would have fewer problems, I think. Fewer people rage quit. If anything, what they would do is they would learn and they would figure out how to get better at it. And here's a perfect example, okay? These were graded at different times. This one came back as a 9. This one came back as a 10. Same box. So why is that a 9? There were no notes given, so I have no way of telling you what the issue was definitively. I can only speculate, and I think the speculation is that the centering was a little bit off. So I'm not disappointed with the grade, but the truth of the matter is that had they provided some notes to say that the centering was off just enough that it looked like a 9 more than a 10, I would have been okay with that. I would have been perfectly okay with that. And then I would have said, like, you know what? You're right. I see it, because first off, I have a comparison, which is great. But, if I really just like looked at this, flipped it on its side, yeah, I can see this is like maybe 70-30, maybe 65-35. I'm good at math. Can you tell? But if you don't have the ability to see that stuff, you might miss it. But then you have something that's really tricky. This one was really tricky. And honestly, if you just look at this card, you will not see it. I guarantee you won't see it because it's almost invisible to the naked eye. There's a scan line, a print line error. I mean, not even an error, like this the thinnest lines right here across. So it was like it must have gone down the sheet, and it just went here, and it was so subtle. I didn't even catch it. I thought this was a 10, and it was going to definitely come back as a 10. Now, that's me making the subjective opinion. That might not have been why he got a 9. I don't know. But there's no way of knowing because they didn't give any notes. Where's the documentation? If you don't provide documentation on your grades, you are failing to establish trust around your brand. And I'm just telling you right now, PSA, if you're listening, you don't get your act together, someone else is going to come into the game and they're going to fix this. And you're not going to be top dog anymore. Mark my words. First off, you think this is rocket science? Like nobody can figure out what you're doing? Let me just explain it for everybody publicly. You check centering. You check the surface. You check the corners. You check the edges. And guess what? You also do like scanning with AI to make sure that there's no creases inside the card. You check quality of the conditions of the card. You use these things to look at the like edges and the devices. Guys, it's not rocket science. We already know. So tell us why it is, what it was that you saw that we didn't. Just tell us. Don't pretend that we can't figure this out or that this is some like secret magical sauce that nobody can know, like it's a mystical thing. It's not. We already know. So put some documentation around this. That way, fewer people are rage quitting when they get a big box. And I mean boxes like they send in like 100 cards. That's a big investment for many folks. And you get back a whole bunch of cards and you only get like 5 to 10% of 10. Like that's a bad return on investment because 9s and 8s really don't pan out. But it also means that there was a disconnect between the person who was submitting it in as a grader. The person who was submitting it in and what the graders understood to be true. There's a disconnect between the two. You want to educate the demographic, your audience, how to get 10s, not 9s. If they know that this is supposed to be coming back as a 9 and they're okay with it, there's no problems. But if they submit this 9 and are expecting a 10, well, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have people who are like on YouTube or on, the social spaces, and they're going to be complaining and saying, oh, PSA sucks. And they don't. But what they're not doing, and the reason that they're getting this feedback or the flack that they get, is they don't provide the documentation. So, and it's not hard. You could literally just begin. You could take this card. You could hit the audio recording button, like as an expert, and you could just say, oh, I can say the surface is good. All right, I see good surface, good clean surface. The scanners came back, nothing wrong with the card itself integrity wise. The corners are all nice and sharp. Centering is a little off top to bottom. I'd say that's a 9 out of 10 for sure. From the centering side, the back looks really good. Definitely everything looks fine and good here. So yeah, 9 out of 10. Everything I just told you, everything I just said, could be captured in audio format, converted into text, and put together as notes. You could have the entire transcript of the conversation the grader had with themselves as they graded this card. Why don't we have this? Why don't we have this? The technology's here, I know, because I work in the tech space. Leave it to you to figure it out. But that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, is the industry can do better. The industry can do better, and I would love to see the industry really take documentation and transparency seriously, because it's not rocket science how this whole thing is done. It's not. There's no secret sauce. There's no real mechanics behind this that makes one company better than the other. Subgrades aren't it. I mean, you can use that as kind of like your process or your outline for doing it, but at the end of the day, really, it's about being transparent and open with your documentation. And whoever fixes that first, I'm telling you what, they're going to start to get a lot more business. So I hope this video was helpful. I think it's certainly was a good thing to get off my chest. But make sure you hit the like button if that was something that you agree with. And consider subscribing to this channel. I talk about cards, I talk about video games, and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great day. And keep on collecting. Cheers.